Hey everyone, I'm Julie Gunlock, host of the Bespoke Parenting Hour. For those new to this program, this podcast is focused on how parents should custom tailor their parenting style to fit what's best for their families, themselves, and most importantly, their kids. Today I'm excited to have on Lindsey Stroud. Lindsey, there you are. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing great. Lindsey is a visiting fellow at the Independent Women's Forum, and she's the director of the Taxpayer Protection Alliance's, it's a great group, Consumer Center, where she focuses on regulations related to alcohol and vaping. So as a parenting podcast, I'm sure you know where we're taking this today, and we're not here just to have cocktail hour. Hey, Lindsey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. It's been a minute. I was here last December.
Yes. It's time. It is time, Lindsey, because we're seeing an awful lot of scary messaging out there about vaping. Yeah. So I'm glad you're coming on to sort of reassure parents and, more importantly, give them some good news, because there is an awful lot of good news on this issue. So I'm just going to start off with asking a very broad question to get this conversation going. Is there a youth vaping epidemic? Because they always use epidemic. Is there a youth vaping epidemic in America?
I'm really glad you asked that question. No, there's not. Epidemic is, the definition, disproportionately affecting the majority of the population, not the minority. And we learned from the CDC last week that they never quit using epidemic. Actually, even though all right, let's break down.
They have a very tiny vocabulary. Tiny.
Yeah. 2019 is when you really saw youth vaping uptick, and you saw about 20% of middle schoolers and high schoolers were current users, which is defined as having used a vape product on at least one occasion.
Okay, I want to slow down. I want to slow down again. No, because this is important. It's funny, Lindsey, you and I deal in this issue. We talk about this issue. We write about this issue. You much more than me. And it's funny. Sometimes when I read your pieces, I'm like, oh, wait, you're too in the weeds, because you write about this and you write to an audience that kind of knows the issue. But there are a lot of parents out there that don't know much about vaping, don't understand that it's 95% less harmful than combustible cigarettes. Some people don't even understand, what is the word combustible showing up here, right? The thing that really harms you is when you're smoking a combustible cigarette. I mean, you take that lighter, think 1970s, right? You take the lighter, you light the cigarette, right? And then you're breathing in the smoke. Okay. So that is what's harmful. Vaping is a whole different thing, which we can get into later. But tell me again how they measure a member of the youth who vapes. They say a kid who's vaping is what? How often do they do it?
On at least one occasion in the 30 days prior to the survey. So a kid at a party who vaped, and his friend handed it to him, that would be considered a current e-cigarette user if he had done it in the 30 days prior to taking the national surveys.
So a habitual, and do they use the word habitual? Like, is it like...
They do break it down for like 20-day plus. And so that's where they're harping on it now with the kids who are vaping and how they're using it more often and everything. But that's still like 3% of kids.
So this is amazing. So I just want to really, again, I want to think of, I'm asking questions as if I'm not really saturated in this issue as much as you and I are, and you much more. But so essentially I love that illustration you gave. So if your kids are at a party, and there's a kid there who actually, has like an e-cigarette device of some kind, and he uses it quite often. And another kid walks up and says, I'd like to try this, right? So based on that, one time in the last 30 days, he is, okay.
A current e-cigarette user, yeah.
Okay. So back to is there, under that measurement, certainly
there's still a lot less kids that were vaping. I'm looking at the numbers that I just did, and they're on the IWF website. Thank you for letting me publish that. There are 2.75 million fewer vapors that are youth vapors from 2019 to 2021. And you can see the series on the website with looking at these state surveys, and it seems that like it peaked in 2019 and it was like a fad, I mean, it's like Beanie Babies. I mean, same thing. Like, oh, hey, here's a new Juul. We're going to go try it. And they're over it now.
Yeah. So I also, want to, you're saying like, if the CDC is still using Epidemic. I did a quick Google search before I came on with you. These are articles just from the last couple days. New York Times, listen to these headlines. New York Times, teenagers keep vaping despite crackdowns on e-cigarettes. Okay. So even if you don't read the article, which we know a lot of people today, we've done, there's enough research into it. People like read the headline, might read a couple lines, and then they're clicking over to a new thing. Yeah. Okay. Here's Washington Post. Gosh. Kids are flocking. They use the word flocking. That's a good word. That's a dollar
it's a great word,
right? It's a great word. Kids are flocking to flavored disposable e-cigarettes, study finds. Okay. And then USA Today, more than 2.5 million middle and high school students still vape despite crackdowns. They love these words, crackdowns, and still and flocking. These are so tell me what you're finding. You kind of touched on this about the real numbers of kids that are vaping, if we're going to really talk about habitual use.
So so it's 2.5 million kids that were defined as using it in the past month, but it was 30.3% of middle schoolers and 14.1% of high schoolers. Now in 2019 it was 5.3 million kids that were vaping currently. And in the past, it was 4.1 million high school students, which 27.5%, and then 1.2 million middle schoolers. And so now that's that was about 1 in 5 in 2019. Now it's about 1 in 10. So, it's been halved if you look at the numbers on it. And it's really cool to see because you're not seeing smokers. Like, kids are not smoking. Like, that's the numbers I am doing. It's because they kept going out, oh, it leads to smoking. No, it doesn't. Actually, it's a substitute, actually.
And again, it's important to reiterate that when we talk about that 2.5 million, many that number is coming from this. I tried it once in the past 30 days.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, but do you know the number of kids? Because I remember doing some research on this, and I mean, it was tiny, the percentage of kids who really are vaping. And look, I also want to get to the point of, I want you to talk a little bit about why vaping is safer. So, because I keep saying, what's the real number of vapors? Okay, even if it's small, or we should be really worried about them. Look, I don't want kids vaping either, but I think parents also need to know the truth about vaping itself, which is look, lots of other things are more dangerous, like alcohol use and driving dangerously, and fentanyl. Okay, which we can talk about later, but I do kind of really want to drive down on that 2.5 million. How many what do you think the real number is of truly habitual vaping among teens?
3. It's 2%.
Right. So we're having this major existential crisis in the United States. Vaping gets more coverage than fentanyl, in my opinion. There's more money going into these campaigns to, stop this mythical vaping crisis that should be spent on more important things, over 2 or 2.5% of the youth.
It's no more than 3%. Yeah, it's very minuscule.
But sadly for parents who don't follow this as closely as I do, we talked about the media. We're talking about public health. Okay, that's pushing this. They're all in agreement, and this is the same thing we saw. I mean, it's amazing, Lindsey, how we saw this with COVID, right? The vaccine, the message is everybody was on that same talking points memo, right? And then we find out they lied. They all lied. Pfizer lied. CDC lied. Everyone was lying, right? And we're starting to see this too. You got the media, you got public health, but you also have another important
Michael Bloomberg.
Well, yes, good old Michael.
Sorry, I had to drop his name.
That's where I'm going. Talk about these very respected medical organizations and charities and the philanthropy side of things.
So they dropped the 2022 National Youth Tobacco Survey results in October 6th. And they did a closed door meeting that was with partners of the CDC. Now I got on that meeting. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't want to make myself, more of a nuance. And it was really interesting. It looked like they were just okay, hey, youth vaping. If you look at the 2021 to 2022 numbers, it pretty much plateaued, but it was kind of like, oh, it's here are all of our talking points. We're still going to go decry youth vaping epidemic. And the Parents Against Vaping lady actually asked, whether using Epidemic was appropriate. And that's where the CDC person was like, we never quit using Epidemic. And it's like, so then I did some research. Michael Bloomberg from 2019 to 2022 has given $10 million to the CDC Foundation to specifically do surveillance on youth vaping.
Unbelievable. But
Well,
also there's also a lot of money in these tobacco-free organizations, and there's a lot of youth organizations that have been created that exist solely to eradicate youth vaping. Frankly, vaping in general, let's be honest, they don't give a crap if people go back to combustibles. They want vaping gone. But it's also, these are respected organizations like the American Medical Association, the American Heart Association, the American Lung Association. I mean, my mother doesn't give she was a huge giver to the American Lung Association because, there was a lot of lung cancer in my family. And so she used to give. Now she doesn't give anymore because I've told her all about this. They are not truthful on this. They are not truthful on vaping. They carry the lies of these sort of anti-tobacco activists. So tell us a little bit about their role in this, because I do think that it's important people understand. You're going to hear it from everyone, from the media to the CDC to these medical organizations. They're all on the same script. And yet if you look, and I want to counter that with some of the research, particularly out of the UK, that is, it really shows that vaping is it's a very useful tool for people trying to quit smoking, and in the fact that it's a far less harmful, which is a whole nother issue. But tell me again a little bit about these philanthropic organizations that exist to keep us healthy and give us good advice, and they're not doing that.
No, it's almost as if they want combustibles still going on. And I'm getting my tin hat on, and stuff, because there's a lot of money to be made in treating smoking related illnesses. Okay. And that's because I've watched at the hearings, I just lost my headset. I've watched like the dentalists come out, against it. And it's like, this is way better for your gums and everything. I don't know why this is a problem for you guys. You brought up the UK. The UK embraces harm reduction. They embrace alternatives to smoking. They subsidize vaping for low income people. They have vape shops in hospitals.
Yes, that is amazing.
But they also have I have an international fellow who's based in South London, and for you to bring a new product to market, you just kind of have to get approval, and you're just following the set of standards. Make sure you don't have these ingredients that you can't have. In order to bring a new product to market in America, if you look at the FDA, they've only approved 23 products through 3 companies' applications. E-cigarettes have been in the States since 2007. And that was in the past year that they, authorized those ones. So I think
just to give an anecdote on that and what Lindsey's talking about here, I think it's important. I know one company that wanted approval of their product, and in order to get it had to submit, I'm not kidding, 4 million pieces of paper. They printed it off, and it was 4 million pieces of paper. Can you imagine transporting that? And that was for one product and one part of the process. It wasn't even the whole process, but go on. So
the process is messed up too. You have safer products. You have these are we know the science shows that these are less harmful than combustible cigarettes. But you have to get the original pre-market tobacco application, and then you have to spend another $1 billion to get the modified risk tobacco product that, where you can actually market it as safer. Now, the FDA did give an MRTP to combustible cigarettes that had low nicotine. 20th century group, yeah.
And you think about also how this stifles innovation. Obviously, the big tobacco companies who are switching over to vaping can afford the 4 million pieces of paper. Just imagine going to Staples and saying I need 4 million pieces of paper, and can afford all the legal fees and the legal analysis and just all the work that goes into producing that. Think of people who are producing other kind or looking at innovating in the e-cigarette space. Again, this is a product that is 95% less harmful than combustible cigarettes. Nobody can do that. That's why this is a big smoochy kiss to big tobacco, because they're the only ones that can go through this approval process. So for consumers looking for new products or new flavors or new systems to kick the very dangerous habit of smoking, they're limited to what just those products from big companies that can afford to go the process. And again, I think we've switched over, frankly, to harm reduction in kind of a clumsy way. I want to kind of go back to that and explain that why Lindsey and Lindsey's a genius at this, and she's incredibly prolific in her writing on this issue. The reason we care about this is not because we're fighting for the right for teens to vape. None of us want kids to vape. Right? I'm always like, I don't want kids to vape.
Here's your Juul kid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I give them out at Halloween. No, the reason I want these products out there is because it is very hard to quit smoking. It is extremely difficult to quit smoking. And Lindsey and I can go on and talk about the psychology behind it. It's really actually fascinating when you look at the methods by which people quit smoking. And some people are fine with a patch, right? Some people are fine with a patch. I am a person who
about 3% of the people as the patch that's their statistics. Yeah, it's about 3%. Yeah, it's like 3 to 5% that were successful at quitting.
If you've never smoked, okay, and I hope my mother does not watch this. She still does not know that I smoked in college. But if you've ever smoked, there is a habit to it. Okay, there is a physical habit. There's also I'm thinking back to the 90s. You always sort of went outside. Right. Yeah. And there was a group of friends, right. Or it was something you did when you went out, right. When I was starting to wean off, I might have one with a drink at a bar or at a concert or something like that. But for me, it was like, there was a time and a place. And then it's so funny, even to this day, sometimes if I'm out and I smell a cigarette, I'm like, oh gosh, I was like a college smoker, right. But there are people who've been smoking for 20, 30, 40 years, and they really want to kick it. They want to, they really want a better life. And vaping mimics that. Vaping mimics the actions. There is an inhaling. In one of the vaping products, there's heat. You can feel the heat.
The heat not burn, which is like it's like I wish we had them in America.
I know.
Thank you, free market. Actually, it wasn't the FDA that shut them down. But I saw them, and actually in the North Carolina, I actually saw the sticks, and I was like, that is so cool. I feel like I'm in Europe right now and stuff. And it was like right before they had to pull everything back. And
they're like they're all going to be in jail if it's no. I'm kidding. But I have a friend.
I think it's going to revolutionize it. I think you're going to see more people quit smoking with using the heat, especially the old school, like I'm never going to use a vapor. And it's like, well, here, use this heated tobacco product. It's almost like a cigarette. I have a friend who was just like that, who said, I will never. He switched to the heat not burn product, and then they got rid of the sticks. And so he, he'd have to who has an extra $4,000 laying around so he can go to Japan to get them, because they're still available in Japan and like in some European countries. But but I watched him go through that process, knowing that he only had a couple cartons left. And meanwhile, his breathing had improved. He felt much better. And again, Lindsey and I, of course, are dipping into this language where we speak because we follow this issue. But this was a different kind of technology. Rather than water vapor, it was heating the tobacco. Yeah. So what is it? Is it kind of the same thing that it turns into vapor? I can't remember exactly the technology. No, it's still combustion. I mean, it's not combustion. It's still smoke. It's not a vapor, but it's they have a heated plate. So it just heats the heat stick, which is, a little cigarette bit is what I kind of called it. It's got a filter on it and everything. They've got a newer one too, but they can't bring it into America until they get FDA authorization on that one.
Heating, not burning, is another way of, it's a delivery system for nicotine. That's the other thing to remember, that this is a delivery system for nicotine. That is the heating and not the burning. It's you're not getting tar and smoke and all those other things that are actually carcinogenic. So that is what's so important. So I think one thing I want, and you have to be really careful here, because people will go, you're saying vaping is fine for kids, right? And I'm not doing that, but I'm saying I want parents to put this in perspective. If your kid is vaping, have the conversation with them, ground them, do whatever you need to do. Take the car keys, take the phone, whatever. It's not good. We don't want that. Okay. But your kid is not doing something like fentanyl, alcohol abuse, or combustible cigarettes that is actually could kill them. Okay.
Well, I would go more into, so the national, they didn't give the 2022 results, but in the 2021, so they asked why kids vape, right? And like overwhelmingly, when they first asked, it was like other reason, my friends or family, and then like flavors always came out like, third. 2021, they asked, I was feeling anxious, depressed, or stressed. And that was like the number one on both like current e-cigarette users and kids who had just done lifetime e-cigarette use. And I think that's where we need to get back to the conversation. No, like what came first, your kids' anxiety issues or the vape? No, anxiety issues came before the vape. And there's a lot more problems when you look at the fentanyl. I mean, there's kids are just taking pills because they're anxious, and well, you just took a pill that killed you.
That you didn't mean to. That you didn't mean
exactly.
to.
Yeah, you poison.
You hear this word laced. Laced with fentanyl. That's a really great point, Lindsey. And I think you said. In 2021, they asked a different question. It's like, what was going on in 2021? I can't think of what was going on. The COVID stuff we are going to be connecting these dots back to COVID for a lot of years.
Okay.
And yet we're still seeing a decline in vaping and a deep historic decline in cigarette smoking.
Yes, thank God for that one. Okay, even on young adults, there's no smoking. It's
funny because I said like sometimes when I smell it, I get this sort of nostalgic because I never smell it. It's not like I'm walking around constantly smelling cigarette soap. I mean, to be honest with you, if I smell cigarette soap, I'm like, who's smoking? Right? And I expect to see my some 90-year-old, right? Who
I didn't know people did that anymore.
Right. And they frankly made it really inconvenient to do it. You can't even smoke outside now in certain areas, So, but this is the thing that bothers me, Lindsey. Parents are overwhelmed right now. Kids are really having a hard time in this country. We see so many signs that all is not well. The kids are not okay.
No.
And yet we have these very powerful philanthropic organizations, the media, and the actual public health organizations that are pushing this as something parents should really focus on. This ain't it, folks. This ain't it. Make sure your kids are I wish there was this amount of attention on tech, on the things that kids are saying, on the fact that they are literally, I drive my kids to school every morning, and I drive, the school is far away from our house, but there's a bus stop that we go by, and there's usually a dozen kids. None of them are talking to each other because it's this hard intersection. So I often get to observe them like a weirdo. But I watch these kids. They literally never talk to each other. They do not. And they all are like this. Now, believe me, when I was in middle school and early high school, I would have killed to have a little device to stare at instead of having to interact with the people around me.
Oh yeah.
But this isn't good, right? We know in our hearts that this isn't good. We know that the rates of fentanyl abuse are just terrifying.
The fentanyl one scares me. I'm sick of talking to lawmakers about vaping, especially when I wrote it for IWF. When you look at the youth overdoses, increased by 100% between 2019 and 2020, but we're still talking about vaping, even though that's decreasing.
Right.
And if I had a child right now, honestly, I'm not endorsing teen vaping, but I wouldn't care if my kid was vaping. I'd care more hey, you go to a party, do not take any pill, man, at all.
I almost cussed on my own podcast, which I guess I can. Yeah. It's my podcast.
That's your podcast,
I was about to say no shit, and then I was like, oh, but I guess I can't say that. But the point is yes. This is the thing parents need to worry about. And also, I keep going back to the tech. What are they seeing online and at what age, right?
Parents just sued Snapchat. By the way,
really?
Actually, they're suing Snapchat over fentanyl. I followed this lady because she's been pretty big since her 14-year-old died, overdosed or poisoned by fentanyl and stuff. And they're suing Snapchat. I was waiting for that to happen. I know that they've been going after Snapchat, and dude, you got to do something. You have drug dealers on your platform.
That's right.
They're not paying taxes.
So I get so angry that these organizations are pushing this. Let's keep using Epidemic, and let's keep going up to Congress, and Senator Durbin can weep with us about this vaping epidemic when we're ignoring fentanyl. And I mentioned alcohol. Look, I'm as free market as they come on alcohol. Also, by the way, it's still illegal. It's illegal for kids to purchase vaping products. It's illegal for kids to buy drugs. It's illegal for kids to buy alcohol. So there's limits to what the government can do to make this, but parents have a lot of control here. It's not the government that has to come in and take away vaping products from adults trying to quit smoking in order to save kids where it's illegal already. They've already made it illegal. The answer here is perhaps we need to look at a more rigorous parenting role here. But when parents are so distracted by or epidemics like vaping, they're not maybe going to focus on things that are maybe not seen. Your kid taking a pill at a party that's laced with fentanyl
and they die.
Or drinking too much at a party and getting in the car, and killing themselves. These to me are the issues I really, and your kids seeing things, getting on these platforms and where there are drugs being pushed or just seeing things they shouldn't see. These to me are the concerns parents should be having right now. And it enrages me that these organizations that make money off keeping the vaping epidemic thing alive, it is, you always have to follow the money, and that makes it even more sickening. So I feel like I could go on and ask you.
We could talk for hours on this one.
I know, we really could. Well, Lindsey, listen, keep up the great work. I want everyone to know that Lindsey is tracking youth vaping rates on the IWF blog. So check her out there. She really is worth a follow. Everything, you have to read everything Lindsey writes. She is relentless in following this issue, and really, I think, is one of the most important voices on this issue. And she's really she really gets into the weeds. She really gets into the data, and frankly, as parents, sometimes we need that level of granularity to make us feel better. So, Lindsey, where can people follow you on social media?
Stroud 89 at Twitter, and I do prolific things on there. I campaign for tobacco-free kids, blocked me on there, so you're and good things. Social, that would be the best way. And then we IWF the blog series that as the states come out with the data, we'll be publishing those. And I also do a 50-state analysis with TPA that will be coming out in January.
Okay, that's great. Well, Lindsey, thank you so much for joining us, and we won't make it a year for your next visit.
We'll talk in March after all the state sessions.
That's great. All right, thanks, Lindsey.
Thank you.